Hello, everyone. My name is Hadia Nuruddin of Duets Learning, and I'm here to share with you some of my favorite tips for personal storytelling. We're on tip number 2, which is pick the simplest path through your stories. When I was in graduate school for writing, my professors would use the phrase economy of language to emphasize the point that fewer words lead to greater clarity. This isn't just about being concise. This is about being strategic about the words that you allow in your story and the ones you have to omit. And sometimes it's a bit of a challenge because we think because something happened in the course of the story that we're trying to tell, an event actually occurred, that we need to include it, but that is certainly not true. So you just want to make sure that you're using only the words you need. Now you may be looking at me now going, well, duh. Of course, everyone tells us that. You have to make sure that you're not using extra words for no reason. But I would argue that when it comes to personal storytelling, that becomes more difficult. And let me share with you why. The first issue is what I call the desire to peel the onion. If you are like me and has a tendency to climb up into their own heads and set up house, you may be constantly second guessing whether or not you are starting the story in the right place. This can also be an occupational hazard. In my work, I'm sort of taught to reject the idea that anything could be happening in a vacuum. Some other event must have led to this. So when telling personal stories, we have to actively resist the urge to trace the origins of the story all the way back to our birth. There's also the issue that the stories that we're telling are often loaded with events that have their own backstories. And while we know that including these retellings are unnecessary, we want to add them because we believe that they're going to help the listener, right, by adding more context. Or it's because we think they're interesting, or because we just think they're funny. Resist that. It's just going to do more harm than good. And finally, we often have the urge to over-explain events in an effort to defend our actions. Look, the action is so complex that you need diagrams to explain it, or it's so sketchy that you feel the need to submit evidence to the court. Leave it out. But you don't want to, do you? This event may be so ingrained in you, you're so invested in it that it's become a part of your identity and how it makes you look. But again, if it doesn't support the intent, it has to go. So if you think about the words that you get to use as an economy, think about details and consider them to be expenses. Details are very, very expensive. But it's not a matter of not using them. It's about making sure you're not running the risk of derailing your story or overloading it by using those details. So I'll give you a quick example. I spent a number of years working at Kinko's, and I feel like I should just be able to say Kinko's, but it has occurred to me that I can't do that anymore because some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. It could be because of your age, which makes me furious. It could be because of the locations that you live in, or it could just be that you just weren't that heavily invested in your copying needs. Your loss. So now, do I say Kinko's Copy Center? Okay, well, that gives you some idea. I mean, it's still kind of a weird thing, but it gives you some idea of what I'm talking about. But Kinko's doesn't exist anymore, right? Now it's FedEx Office. So do I say, well, when I worked at Kinko's, now it's FedEx Office? Okay, well, what does that do? What does that add? It may add something. I'm not sure what it's going to add. Now, and also me saying that, some people may assume that I'm talking about Kinko's corporate. No, I worked in the store as a kiosk. Well, a kiosk is someone who is in charge of making the copies. I mean, not in charge. I mean, you're one of the people who makes the copies. And I think we call the kiosk because we had a key that you see what I mean? I mean, it just keeps going and going and going. So what do I say? I worked in retail. I had a retail job. It really depends on, is my adventure that I'm trying to explain in this story about making copies or not? If not, then maybe I don't need to say Kinko's copy at all. So it's making those decisions around details that are expensive to your story. Next, make sure that you're choosing details that clarify, right? Have you ever heard of the term navel gazing? It's defined as being self-indulgent or an excessive contemplation of oneself, of a single issue at the expense of a wider view. Basically, it means that if you add too many details, you run the risk of seeming just too invested in your own story, which is not the point of you telling this story. It's supposed to share. And if you're in a learning context, oh my goodness, it is to help other people feel comfortable enough to tell their stories, not just so they can hear all the minutia of what happened to you last Thursday. So the act of exploring too many details can come across as a bit selfish, in that is driven more by your desire to talk than your desire to clarify. So, details can stagnate your story, while omitting details and summarizing can propel the story forward. All right, that is tip number 2. Thank you. Until next time.